to the Friends of Starkweather Creek annual meeting. We've been an organization since 2002. So here we are at our 19th year and celebrating that take care of the creek and involve a lot of people that have a lot of good feeling about the creek and want to help it and enjoy it a lot. So this is our annual meeting and welcome everyone. Go ahead. So we in this meeting, and there's some of us board members hanging out at the Lansdowne Park recently, and so welcome everyone. As you see, we've got an agenda here for what's going to happen. We've got Allison Madison from the Saltwise Project to speak to us about how we're going to how we're looking at and trying to reduce salt all over the state, and myself, Lance Green, and Mike Harper will talk about the chloride project we're doing in our watershed, which is to try and study chlorides. Then we're going to have a look at a new recreational map that we've put out. I think Dia, if she's here, we'll talk about that. The Volunteer Growers Network, Jeff has had a wonderful project involving a whole bunch of people and a whole bunch of milk jugs with people to grow native plants that we can plant all over our stream banks and habitat areas. Paul will talk about the wonderful Friends of Urban Nature program and the nature outings that we've done this past year. I'll talk a little bit about creek health and the issues that we have. We'll have a financial report about the organization for the past year. And of course, the official part of the meeting, election of new board members at the end. So I hope you can all stay through to the end of this, and we'll be done before 9 o'clock, I'm sure. Okay. First off, we've got Allison Madison, who has had a nice booth there at the Yahara Park Festival, and it was all about salt, and a lot of people got to learn about it. And she's gonna, and there's the web address of the whole statewide Wisconsin Saltwise effort. I suggest you go there sometime and learn about a lot more about this. So I guess we'll go ahead with Allison now and switch to her.
All right, everybody. Thank you. It says I'm still muted. But
you're good.
We should be good, right? Okay.
Yeah,
great.
We can hear you, and we need a screen share, I guess.
Yep, I'm going to do that in a second. I just wanted to say hello to everybody first, and I really do appreciate your time today. And I also appreciate that. I don't know if people noticed in the slide that Lance just shared, the tent that we used at the Orton Front Festival was indeed the Starkweather Creek, Friends of Starkweather Creek's tent. So kind of running things on a shoestring budget here, and really do appreciate the sharing of resources. And also thanks to, I know some other folks were out with Lance at another community event prior to the Orton Front, and you guys were sharing some Saltwise information. And perhaps some of you have also worked already to share Saltwise information in the watershed. So thanks for all that you're doing. So with that, I will pull up some slides here. So first one, just a huge mountain of salt, right? Something that unfortunately has become a bit of a blasé appearance in Wisconsin in the winter. Also, you know, the rest of the year, sometimes these salt piles just get covered up, hopefully covered up the rest of the year. But since the late 1950s, early 1960s, when we started salting roads, just kind of been like, more salt, it's working well, some's good, more is better. And it hasn't been until really recently that scientists and governmental officials and locally, you know, City of Madison, Dane County, Madison Water Utility, Dane County, Madison-Dane County Public Health are starting to say, hey, wait, all of that salt we're putting down, where is it going? It's going into our water, right? And so folks across the state are starting to look at this issue with a bit more of the, you know, importance that it really deserves. So big idea, whenever you see salt out, is to connect that salt is going into our water. So all the salt we put down eventually is making its way into our water. either lakes and streams or our groundwater. So we really need to think longer term, right? We need to think more than just, this winter or this storm, how are we treating the land? Because of course, that's how we're treating our water. One thing that's really helping this movement right now is that the cost of salt is going up. So salt's been pretty cheap, but its cost has almost tripled in the last 20 years. And so folks are starting to pay a little bit more attention to how much they're putting down. This data came from Wisconsin DOT, obviously one of the biggest users of salt in the state. They purchase state for all the counties to maintain state highways. And then a lot of municipalities also purchase salt from the state. So this is their, like the state bid for public entities to purchase it from the state. Although if you're in like the middle of the state, like Marathon County, there's actually almost like a $15 surcharge on this cost because it takes a lot of energy to then transport it from, whether it be from Milwaukee or from the Mississippi River to other parts of the state. So all of this is driving the state, counties, municipalities to take another look at salt. And some great news is that the DOT just released last week that winter 2020-21 was not an all-time low, but a 30-year low for them in terms of their salt use. So we really are seeing changes in practices around winter road maintenance. And these best practices, we're just working to make sure that they are adopted as quickly as possible across the state. Another reason to think about salt is that the cost you pay when you buy it at the store or the state purchases it isn't the only cost, right? Obviously, it's affecting our water, but it's also impacting vegetation along roadways to the tune of about $2 billion a year nationally. It does a lot of damage to infrastructure, roads and bridges, and causes about $5 billion a year in damage, again, nationally, due to premature aging of this infrastructure. AAA estimates we do about $3 billion of damage to private vehicles from salt corrosion. And so kind of all in all, when you take these other impacts, indirect costs of salt use, for every dollar we spend on salt, we're doing about $10 of damage to our infrastructure. And that's based on the idea that if we're paying maybe like $70 a ton for salt, 70 to 80, every ton of salt is doing $800 to over $1,000 of damage. So as Lance mentioned, and our name suggests, this is not just a problem in the Madison area or in Starkweather Creek. It is going on across the state and really throughout the snowbelt region of the United States. So naturally, our freshwater would pretty much have zero salt in it, zero chloride. Salt, again, means sodium chloride. All of these dots would be purple. So these are measurements of freshwater chloride levels in freshwater lakes and streams across the state. And we can see that we're not in this like dark purple dot scenario anymore, right? Especially in southern Wisconsin, we're almost all red. And then we have some oranges and even yellows around Milwaukee, our most highly urbanized part of the state, has received the most road salt, and it's there in the water. So what do these levels mean though? So to take a step back, again, like I said, naturally pretty much zero. There are a few parts of the state where we have some natural like salt brine in rocks that were like ancient seabeds. So a couple areas where maybe would be upwards of 10 milligrams per liter. A limit that the EPA has set is 230 milligrams per liter. In the state of Wisconsin, the DNR has set a somewhat more lenient limit of 395 milligrams per liter, saying that it's not until that limit is hit that organisms, freshwater organisms, are going to start to have some negative impacts from the salt in the water. And they've also set a secondary limit saying that if organisms are exposed to salt at the level of 757 milligrams per liter, even for a short period of time, that's going to have negative impacts. So in Wisconsin, again, in that like around Milwaukee, we're seeing some concentrations from a USGS study up to like 7,000 milligrams per liter. So like 10 times above that acute limit. And Sewer PAC is the Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission. They're just finishing up like a 2.5 year study looking at chloride concentrations in southeastern Wisconsin streams. And they saw a number of, just from their grab samples, a number of concentrations above 3,000. So definitely a problem that we need to, spend some more time digging into, figuring out what are levels, where are we at right now. And I know that Lance and Mike are going to talk more about the work that's happening in Starkweather. But to give you kind of one more piece of context, if milligrams per liter is causing you to kind of like have flashbacks to chemistry class in high school, it's okay. To put this in perspective, the DNR limit of 395 milligrams per liter is 1 teaspoon of salt in 5 gallons of water. So one thing that we like to say is to remind people that 1 teaspoon of salt pollutes 5 gallons of water. Or if you can save, 1 teaspoon of salt, you're protecting 5 gallons of water. So it's a good kind of rule of thumb. And then I also wanted to share, I mentioned the Sewer PAC study. So this is some of that grab sample data that they have, where you can see those spikes, of course, happening, in the winter, February, well above this black dotted line is at 757, the acute toxicity limit. But another thing I really want to point out is that when you're looking across this graph, across the year, we're not seeing these dots go back down to 0 again, right? We're seeing elevated chloride concentrations now across the year. And that's due to the fact that since we've been salting for decades, we have salt that's built up in soils and in the groundwater. And so now even in the summer months, we're getting groundwater recharge into these streams that's salty. So we're salting our streams in the summer with the groundwater. And what does that do? So I mentioned, negative consequences to aquatic organisms. So we're seeing decreased rates of growth, reproduction, susceptibility to parasites. This research is coming out of the University of Toledo. Bill Hintz is one of the leading researchers looking at impacts of salt on our freshwater organisms. He also put together this slide. I'm grabbing these from his Salt Awareness Week presentation back in January. And this gets at the idea that some of the first organisms to be impacted, the most susceptible, are the zooplankton. So not necessarily the most charismatic out there, but very important in our aquatic ecosystems. When zooplankton populations go down, the algae that eat them, those populations are going to go up, right? Not as much predation. So as it gets saltier, water can get more green and murky with algal populations. Also, if we have less or fewer zooplankton around, that means less food kind of moving up the food chain as well. Another thing, and I'm going to get to the good, I'm going to get to some more positive stuff, but first I'm hitting you with all the negative. So as we put salt into our water, it's not just mixing equally or evenly throughout the water column, right? Salt water is more dense than fresh water. So that salt water in lakes, in ponds is going to move down to the bottom. And the big problem there is that in Wisconsin, most of our lakes are naturally flipping over. They're doing seasonal turnover. And what some scientists are seeing is that when we have lakes getting really salty, that dense salty layer is inhibiting, it doesn't want to move up to the top. So it's inhibiting that natural turnover and in some cases stopping it completely. So this is an article from New York State in the Adirondacks where Muir Lake is not turning over anymore. There are also some lakes in Minnesota that have hit this point as well. None in Wisconsin, but Hillary Dugan, who's at UW-Madison, and she's got a postdoc, and I forget his name right now. They're kind of working on a model that is trying to understand how salty Lake Mendota would have to be before we would see this turnover stopping. And the turnover is really important, not just that it happens, but I mean, it's recirculating oxygen throughout the water column and nutrients from decomposition. So it really is important for our natural freshwater lakes. So salt in the fresh water, in our surface water, salt also, as I mentioned, from that sewer pack study, making its way into our groundwater. In the city of Madison, we're seeing the chloride concentration, the average chloride concentration in our municipal wells just creep upward at a fairly slow rate, which is good. The saltiest well up here at the top whisker is well 14 on the opposite side of town from y'all in the Starkweather Creek watershed. It's well 14 by University Avenue and Whitney Way. And so the city of Madison, though, is looking at needing to replace that well in the next 10 to 15 years, which will impact you as taxpayers. So yeah, taking care of our fresh water also helps, the pocketbook there. To go a little bit closer to you guys over to the Arboretum, I was able to go out with a few staff from the Arboretum this summer, and they have been gathering data at some of the shallow groundwater springs right around Lake Wingra, the springs that feed the lake. And they're seeing pretty elevated chloride concentrations. Several of those are above 100, and one is actually above 550 milligrams per liter. And again, just want a slide to share. This isn't just a Madison problem. It's happening across the state. Naturally, that we'd see blue, no salt in our water. It's not the case anymore. This data came from UW Stevens Point Well Water Viewer. So this is public. If you want to go on, just type in UW Stevens Point Well Water Viewer, and you can look at a number of different parameters of water quality. And all of this data is coming from private wells. So these are not municipal wells. They're private wells in rural areas where we would think, maybe road salt shouldn't be that big of a problem, right? Out in the country. But I want to acknowledge that road salt is one of the contributors here. It is the primary contributor to the salting of our water. But water softeners also contribute to this problem, as do potassium fertilizers. The cheapest potassium fertilizer, or so I'm told, is potassium chloride. So chloride is just a carrier there, but contributes to this problem. And then calcium chloride is sometimes used as a dust suppressant on rural roads. So yeah, all of these things contribute to the problem. And yeah, but I'm going to share some of the things we're doing to fight against it or to help this situation. So these are some of the early partners. Saltwise started in Dane County. And this last year, I've had the pleasure of being the first staff person in Saltwise and working and connecting with folks across the state, different watershed organizations and municipalities and stormwater partnerships. And this is really thanks to the Fund for Lake Michigan, who funded a grant for 2021 and now again for 2022. So we're able to do this Saltwise work statewide. So what's our message? We're trying to get anyone involved in winter maintenance, also, just general citizens, kind of rethink the way that we do winter maintenance, the way that we do salting. So this is possible. Okay, so I've got a couple little stories from right around Madison. Village of DeForest took a Saltwise training class. They went in and they calibrated their equipment. So like I said, we used to just kind of say, oh, salt's good, like more is better. Oh, it's bad today. I was just, crank her up to 10. Like people really were not paying attention. It was pretty cheap to how much salt they were putting down, like at all. Okay. Just like hundreds, and there's like hundreds and hundreds of pounds of salt per lane mile. Or just, maybe they, the truck says one thing, but they're not calibrating, so they don't actually know how much salt they're putting out. So one big thing is just calibrating equipment so you can make a precise application. You know how much salt you're putting down, and you can put down that amount. Also, you see the term here, pre-treatment. So pre-treating roads, the best way to do that is to put salt brine down before the storm. So some of you have probably seen like the lines on the road, especially at county highways. And what they're doing, that is still salt. There's no silver bullet. Like I'm not going to tell you, oh, like buy this product instead. It's still salt, but it works kind of like putting some like Pam spray or like a little oil on your skillet before you cook your food. So it prevents that bond from forming between the snow and the pavement. I know some of you have probably, like me, gone out to shovel your sidewalk and people have tramped down and you can't get their footsteps right off the sidewalk, and you're scraping, but it's stuck on there, right? So by putting a little bit of salt brine down before the storm, what communities do is that they can then come through with their plow and scrape it off, and they use way less, sometimes even no more or no rock salt afterwards. So it's been really miraculous to see reductions of 50 to sometimes even 70% by using brine for anti-icing, and also using brine for mixing in with the rock salt, which I'll show you in just a second. So in Middleton, they haven't gone to brine for anti-icing, but they are pre-treating their salt with brine. So I know this is probably pretty small for you, but here we have like very smart trucks where operators can dial in how many pounds per lane mile. This is 300 pounds per lane mile of salt will go down. These trucks are smart so that if the driver needs to slow down, the salt auger is slowing down. So it's still putting down that 300 pounds per lane mile rate. If the truck stops, it stops salting. I think we've all kind of come up to intersections where there's a pile of salt, right? And I'm not going to blame anybody who is out there, usually in the middle of the night, bad conditions, crazy drivers around them, for like not remembering to like turn every dial and stop the salt and start it back up again, right? Like we need the trucks to be smart enough to do this for them. And this truck is, and it's also mixing in some brine with the salt as the salt goes down. So what happens there, if we wet the salt before we put it down, it sticks and it starts working immediately. If salt is dry rock salt, a lot of that can bounce off the road and not be effective. So City of Middleton, with these upgrades, calibrating, educating their staff, reduce their salt use by 50%. So these are not insignificant wins here. Another 50% reduction we've seen from the Bruce Company, big landscaping company and snow removal company in the winter. Again, attended the classes, calibrated equipment, and started using brine, and saw these reductions. Excuse me. So how do we help continue to write the next chapter to do winter maintenance better? So I've mentioned a few times the smart salting workshops. So these are held both virtually and in person, geared towards municipalities, the smart salting for Wisconsin roads, and then also for private companies, contractors, school districts, colleges, universities, anybody who's doing parking lots and sidewalks can attend that version of the class. And we're keeping these, they've all been free so far too. Another thing that we've done is to host equipment open houses across the state. So this year we had 9 of them, from Brown Deer up to Green Bay, like De Pere was one of our hosts, over to Menominee, down to Lancaster in Grant County. We actually had Iowa DOT came over and joined in on that one. It was great. So we're getting operators to talk to operators, superintendents, foremen, to talk to one another about those best practices, sharing the wins. Here we have Corey Teets from the city of Eau Claire, and he is just thrilled to talk about, what progress the city of Eau Claire has made, and to share that with other folks. And so often I feel like municipalities aren't necessarily sharing that information. So we're trying to facilitate those conversations. Here are a couple of photos from the event just last Wednesday. I think it was Wednesday or Thursday. We were over at Garver Feed Mill. So we hosted a class right in your watershed. And then afterwards we had a little equipment open house just geared towards, I say little because it was geared towards the parking lots and sidewalks folks. So much smaller equipment compared to what I've been seeing when we're talking with municipalities. But here we've got a little brine set up behind the truck. Matt Meyer with Enviro Sealers, private contractor doing snow removal in the winter, created this last year after taking the Saltwise class, and now he's making his own brine and actually renting these out to other folks so people can try out brine without making huge capital investments. Here we've got someone from Madison College, Tim Pollock, and he's talking to a staff from Madison Parks about this John Deere with the power broom in front. So just sweeping, plowing, then maybe sweeping the salt or sand, sweeping the snow and not even using salt sometimes. Another way to share knowledge and best practices through Wednesday webinars. So Mike Rupiper came on a couple weeks ago and shared a little bit about the Starkweather Creek with an audience that was actually from across the US. But our first one was with some private contractors. We've had Mayo Clinic, their facilities manager shared about salt reductions they've made. And just in a couple more weeks, we're gonna have one called Brine on a Budget. Because one of the barriers to a number of municipalities and private companies who want to start using brine is the startup costs of getting the equipment to put down liquids. So we've got someone who works at a town in southeastern Wisconsin around Lake Geneva, talking about how he started using brine there when he got there. They didn't have any equipment for it, and he actually went out and bought a stock tank and started just mixing up brine and showing the community that this really worked. It was going to save them on salt, save some money the first year, and then was able to get the go ahead to move forward. So obviously, like I'm sharing, a lot of what we're doing is just trying to share these stories, these success stories. One way that we did that this year was during Wisconsin Salt Awareness Week, planning on doing that again this year, end of January. I've got one photo here, just love it. Ho Chunk Gaming came to the equipment open house last week. They built up this little brine machine for just like, I think they said like $400. And they reduced their salt use. Last year, they told me like they thought 70%. And when I was at the equipment open house last week, they said they actually only used like 3 bags worth of salt to make their brine last year. And they had purchased over 40. So they, in a typical winter, would put down more than 40 bags of salt, and they used 3. So yeah, so sharing their stories out, as Lance mentioned before, at events like the Orton Front Festival. We had folks make prints so they could print their own shirt, or here we've got like a little doggy bandana. So we worked with a local artist who created these prints of some of the organisms that are impacted by salt in our water. Last Monday, I had a similar event at UW-Madison with some of my Badger volunteers. And also going around the state and doing some outreach via paddles. So getting people paddling, kayaking, canoeing out on waterways and testing those waters for chloride concentrations in the summer to get some baseline information and hopefully get some folks to become monitors throughout the winter. I also want to throw in there, even though it's not road salt focused, but our water softeners, as I mentioned before, do contribute to this as well. So the Madison Metropolitan Sewerage District is facing this because all of the salt that comes to them from 100,000 some homes and all those home water softeners, they cannot pull that salt out of the water. And so it all goes into our streams. And so we got a few old water softeners and converted them into buoys and put them out on Lake Wingra, which is the saltiest of the Madison lakes. Because I think one of the biggest things with water softeners is people aren't even aware that this is a problem. So one thing you can do is make sure it's running as efficiently as possible. If you do have one, I'm going to talk a minute about brine reclamation, which could be a little tricky at your home unless you're very mechanically minded and want to go that route. But there are different salt-free alternative devices. So be happy to share resources on those if anyone at all is interested in pulling out your conventional water softener and running with something else. But this is a photo of Mike Gresh from the Lucky Building. So the Lucky Building downtown it's on University or Johnson, but very large, like residential and commercial mixed use building. 2 giant water softeners that regenerate, like I think he said, like almost every other day. And all of that water softener waste, all that salt is going to our streams. And he said, why am I buying all of these bags of salt in the winter to put salt down when I'm buying all these bags of salt to put in my water softener, and then I'm just discharging that? So he started capturing the water softener brine, and now uses that to do de-icing in the winter. And folks love it. People are not tracking rock salt into those lobbies anymore. And he's not buying as much salt. So I'm working to get a webinar set up with Mike to tell his story. And we also have a couple other folks in the Madison area that are just getting started right now on brine reclaim. So before I pop off or answer any questions, just a few reminders. So Salt Awareness Week coming up in January. It would be great to see all of you, or to have you like spread the word about this. It'll be our second year. We're just going to have webinars, primarily going to have webinars during the noon hour. So like from 12:30 to 1 with different saltwise experts. And we might try to do a local event just based on COVID concerns in the winter, maybe a little tricky, but hoping to do something locally too. And then promoting the different training opportunities. So the workshops, the webinars, and then we've got a whole bunch of resources on our website as well. So if you have any connections to winter maintenance professionals, if through an apartment building or a business that you frequent, anybody you can talk to. And then of course, just spreading the word more generally, educating others that the salt we see in the winter, the salt we put in our water softeners, all of that salt is going into our fresh water. So every 1 teaspoon, remember, protects 5 gallons of water. And one of the ways that I, as I mentioned, really like to do this is trying to share the success stories. So inspiring folks by telling the stories of those who are doing some great work. And then, of course, if you are willing to follow us on social media, we just started up an Instagram, but we also have Twitter and Facebook. It's a really easy way to just like a post, share a post. It really benefits us in terms of getting our grant funding, and is a really easy way to spread the word. So with that, I'll stop sharing. Can answer any questions. Thank you.
Oh, thanks so much, Allison. And if anybody has any questions for her right now, it looks like Jeff does.
Jeff?
Yeah, thanks, Allison, for sharing all that great information. A couple quick questions. One of the first slides is you mentioned that the price of salt was increasing. Do you know why that is? Is it just natural inflation, or is there any particular reason why it's going up?
It sounds like we're just using a lot of salt. And so the demand has been driving that. We've used up some of the reserves closer. So now actually some of the salt, like the DOT is buying, it's coming from like Chile, and they need to like ship it up.
Wow.
Yeah.
During I guess there was a map that you shared with different dots, and the colored dots correlate to different concentrations of chloride in different water bodies. There was one purple dot in Dane County, though. Do you know which body of water isn't doing that badly?
I don't know. And I did realize as I went down through the slides, I forgot to share, we do have data collected by Dane County Public Health on the chloride concentrations in all the lakes. It's actually some of the only longitudinal data that I've been able to find in the state. So I can share that later with Lance, or share a link to it. But yeah, I just kind of gathered those maps from Hillary Dugan's graduate student, actually, who has done a lot more research, like studying the concentration. So I'm working to kind of tell the story, and I have a general concept of, like what waters are more polluted because they're on a list, right? But I couldn't just like rattle off what that water body would be, that purple dot. So.
I've heard of places using lots of sand, or I don't know if this has any validity, but beet juice.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, for bringing that up. So sand actually used to be relied on a bit more heavily, and municipalities have moved away from it because it's messy. And so they're using a lot of it as well. And it's not like a great alternative either, because it does cause sedimentation in our streams. So, and it also doesn't remove ice, right? It doesn't melt ice. It's just providing traction. And then beet juice. And I guess I should also add in there though, like salt isn't really effective when it gets super cold, right? Sodium chloride is really only effective down to 15 degrees Fahrenheit. So when you get to those lower temperatures, we either need to add another chloride compound, so like magnesium chloride or calcium chloride have slightly lower melting points. So those can help make salt be more effective, or especially if we're like around our own homes, apartment buildings, like to switch to sand then, because if you put salt down, you're like, it's not melting, I'll add more. Like, no, it's just not going to work because it's too cold out. So do use sand when we get down to 15 degrees or lower. And then you also mentioned beet juice. So beet juice, it's natural, right? Like that should be great. But any organic product, meaning anything with sugar, right, with carbon in it, when it gets to our water, like that is delicious for microbes, right? And they're just going to eat all those sugars. As they do that, they reproduce and they're breathing in the dissolved oxygen. So dissolved oxygen levels go down. So beet juice can be used as an additive. Sometimes I'm actually hearing more municipalities use a proprietary compound called beet heat, which has some of that magnesium chloride in it and some sugars that can help with that pre-wetting and help the salt stick. But we don't want to just like switch over to sugars and just create, another problem.
Excellent.
I have one quick thing I wanted to share as well that I thought was pretty funny and interesting. So one of my former botany professors shared a photo with me. It's outside of Beloit at their Welcome Center. And it was a whole giant, almost like a prairie of this goldenrod that's common along the Atlantic Ocean. It's called seaside goldenrod. And it's because they've piled up their salty snow pile for so long there that eventually one of the seeds found their way, I don't know, from a vehicle or something, and grew there because it's so salty. So there's a big patch of this really rare, like salt-loving goldenrod in Beloit, Wisconsin.
Wow, that's a great story, Jeff. Thank you for sharing. And if you could pass that picture along, I would love it.
I'll share it. Sure.
Paul, yeah.
Yeah, that's a perfect lead into my question about native plants and sort of biomitigation opportunities. On the negative end of that equation would be things like I wanted to ask you, how much salt is there in like from capo, the large cattle production operations, in the manure, and then when that's put on the fields, that I know that it's salty, it's got urine in there and whatnot, and that ends up in the groundwater, and I don't know that it's being farmed in a manner that recycles that salt back into the production of crops. The same thing for lawn fertilizer, which clearly isn't being recycled back into production of crops. Does that also include that salt-based potassium fertilizer? Are either one of those being looked at as part of what's contributing to this big groundwater recharge thing?
So the potassium chloride, I mean, that is being looked at, and so the state of Wisconsin hasn't been at the forefront of looking at this issue. The state of Minnesota's pollution control agency has done a lot more. They're way ahead of us, and they have a state chloride budget, and they are actually working. Actually, they did just put out a state chloride management plan. So they are trying to look at really comprehensively all of the inputs. So potassium chloride fertilizers are part of the problem. I don't have a good handle on how widespread that they are right now in the state. Potassium along with nitrogen and phosphorus are the three macronutrients in our soil.
Sorry, can you turn your mic off and turn it on again? We're getting some weird feedback, confirming in our chat that it's sounding a little.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's the microphone or what's going on.
Jump off and back just real quick here.
Sorry, I just wanted to confirm it wasn't just my.
Yeah, we were getting that too. I could understand most of what
Yeah,
she
it was
said, but
it was everyone. But
I thought maybe it was
but,
just me.
I am sorry to say that we're going to have to kind of cut off this presentation now
Okay.
because we're running a little bit late already.
You're
And we're going
back.
to just take a few minutes now and talk about how the Starkweather watershed has been involved in this whole chloride issue for the last couple of years. And if James, if you would put on the next PowerPoint, that would be good.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah,
Thank you
yeah.
so
Thanks.
much,
Happy
Allison.
to,
That
happy
was
to follow
wonderful.
up. Yeah, and I'll
We
put
could
my,
talk about this for hours.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
we could just talk about this for hours and maybe we'll have another whole session on it. Thank you so much. All right, as you see here, we've had a chloride projects going on in the Starkweather watershed with a grant from the DNR, the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission has been leading this effort, and we've been partnering with it with the other organizations that are listed at the bottom paragraph there, and we're comprehensively trying to assess where the salt's coming from and how we can reduce it. So I think I'll just let Mike take it away with what he's going to say about this. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Lance. Got a short kind of presentation here just to kind of hit some of the highlights of the work that's been done over the past year on this.
Okay, James,
Do you want to share your screen?
Oh,
Sorry.
Yep, sorry.
Cool. Now that makes sense. I remember you telling me that.
It says disabled.
Oh, I got you. Sorry. To make co-hosts. All right, you should hopefully be able to do that now.
Okay, there we go.
You did it.
Is that all right?
Looks good.
Okay, great. So I won't go into this too much because Allison did a really good job kind of talking about the problem with too much salt, but you know, Minnesota Pollution Control Agency put together a nice graphic kind of summarizing the sources and impacts on our surface waters and drinking waters. For Starkweather Creek, we're primarily focused with de-icers, not only road salt, but the salt used on parking lots and sidewalks and driveways and things like that, our paved surfaces. So in our area, there's actually 4 water bodies that are currently on the impaired water list for chloride. Pheasant Branch Creek in Middleton area, upper part of the Yahara River through DeForest and Windsor, Odana Pond, a small little pond over here in the golf course, and then of course Starkweather Creek over here, our watershed. So I think you're all pretty familiar with the watershed, but Starkweather Creek's been listed as impaired for chloride since 2016. So for the past 5 years, it's been on the impaired list. So we kind of got together and started talking to some folks and said, well, why don't we put together a chloride management plan for Starkweather Creek watershed? The concept that we could kind of demonstrate the effectiveness of all these great practices and education effort that Allison talked about, that Wisconsin Saltwise is doing by working focused effort in a single watershed. So we wanted to, as part of this plan, identify the most likely sources of salt in the watershed, implement best management practices to reduce salt, which Allison talked about, and then do monitoring so we could not only find out what current chloride levels are, but track what we hope are reductions that we'll see over time through this effort. So we couldn't have done this without a big steering committee of other organizations and agencies to help us, and Friends of Starkweather Creek was a key component of that. Lance has served on the steering committee for this project since the beginning. Jeff and Lance and myself and a few others have all been involved in doing some of the monitoring. Friends of Starkweather Creek has helped with some of the outreach, so been a key partner in this project, along with some of these other organizations too. So the steering committee kind of helped us guide the development of the plan. Some like Saltwise and some of the other companies like Bruce Company have knowledge of salt use practices and reduction efforts that are going on. Knowledge of the watershed, City of Madison helped with that. Some of these companies have been early adopters of Saltwise practices, and as I mentioned, some have been key implementation partners in this effort. So our plan had three basic components. One was kind of a GIS analysis to find out where the primary sources of salt were likely to be in the watershed, and then the voluntary monitoring, and then community engagement, primarily led by Wisconsin Saltwise. So the GIS analysis, basically, as I mentioned, we're kind of looking at what are the potentially salted surfaces in the watershed: roads, parking lots, driveways, sidewalks. And what our results showed was that in Starkweather Creek watershed, at least, the vast majority of the potentially salted surfaces are non-residential multifamily properties, parking lots, and driveways and sidewalks in those areas. So what that creates is a huge opportunity. About 30% of the companies working as private applicators have only gone through the certified applicator training that Allison talked about at this point. So getting those private companies that are doing salting on mall parking lots to go through the training is a huge opportunity to further reduce salt in the watershed. The 20 largest parking lots in the East Branch of Starkweather Creek total 174 acres. That's almost 30% of the residential multifamily paved area in the watershed. So a relatively few number of parking lots gets us a fairly huge portion of the paved area that we think is primarily responsible for a big part of the problem. So getting those owners and managers of the largest parking lots in the East Branch to use certified winter maintenance professionals is critical. And that's kind of our focus over the next couple of years here, now that we've sort of helped narrow down the problem a little bit. So last year we did chloride monitoring. We had about 12 monitors in total. Did 4 different sites, collected grab samples, took conductivity measurements, used what's called a Quantab strip. It's like a titrator strip that measures chloride. And then we also took lab samples. So we had like a public health lab did the analysis. So we had a verified chloride level for those samples that we took. We did roughly weekly monitoring in the winter. And then whenever there was a salting or melt event, we tried to go out to, as well as consecutive days if we hit really high levels. I don't want to go through all the data here, but it is posted on the project website, which I'll show you later, but just a couple of the locations. So this is Fair Oaks on the West Branch. So you can see, again, one of the things Allison talked about, even in the summer months, West Branch has averaged about 100 milligrams per liter. The highest we saw last year on the West Branch was about 530, so above that chronic level, not quite to the acute level. And then a site on the East Branch, this is the Highway 30 bridge site, similar story, but much more higher levels of chloride on the East Branch. So we've got levels around 200 milligrams per liter, even in the summer. And the highest reading was up around 1,300 milligrams per liter. That peak was during the spring melt event. We had like an early spring melt, kind of the end of February, where temperatures got really warm for extended period of time, and a lot of the snow cover and snow piles started melting. And that's when we saw these really peak levels of chlorides in Starkweather. So the key findings from the monitoring last year, consistently higher levels of chloride in the East Branch compared to the West Branch. Baseline chloride levels in the non-winter months are telling us the groundwater is contaminated. Allison mentioned that too. The highest chloride levels, as I said, were in the spring melt event. And we also found that these Hatch Quantab strips were really easy to use and correlated well to the lab results. So we're focusing on that as our method going forward for this season. So for this coming season, we're eliminating the conductivity monitoring because that was time consuming and not particularly helpful. Focusing on the Quantab strips, we're expanding the number of sites to 12 monitoring sites total, 5 on the East Branch because we're really trying to focus on that because that's the bigger problem. 3 on the West Branch and 1 on the main stem. So the idea of this more monitoring sites, again, we're trying to identify the hot spots, which really help us focus our outreach efforts. So another part of the project was a watershed survey. We had an online survey. Friends helped us get that information out to get respondents to the survey. Basically, what we're trying to do with that is gauge the current levels of knowledge and attitudes about salt that people have, and then also use it as a baseline to measure how effective our information and education efforts are. So I'm not going to go into a lot of the details of it, but just a couple of things. So one of the questions we asked people was, in your neighborhood, as you're out walking around, what's the kind of salting that you most typically see? And, fortunately, most of the respondents, about 60%, see they're seeing something like this image A, which is the right amount of salt. But we're seeing, a fair amount of salting that looks like these other images B and C, and that's definitely room for improvement in the watershed. The other question that we ask people is, what's the best way to get you information about reducing salt? And maybe not too surprisingly, these days, most people prefer social media and emails, newsletters, community events, but the social media, website, and emails are really the high preference. So community, that kind of leads into community engagement. So as Allison mentioned, there's a fair amount of social media, public information around salt reductions, especially during Salt Awareness Week last year. Friends helped get that out. We helped get that information out. That's a big focus of this effort, is just to hopefully make everybody in the watershed aware of the need for salt use reduction. We sent letters out to some of the commercial property owners, trying to get them to go to trainings. And then it was mentioned, Saltwise and Allison was at the Orton Front Fest, and Friends of Starkweather Creek had a booth at Econ Park Fest, where we helped spread information about our project and salt reduction. So all of that helps get the word out into the watershed. So through the next few years, our plan is continued focus on community engagement, especially the large parking lots where we think the majority of the problem is, expanded monitoring to help us really track down where the problem's occurring and hopefully show improvement over time as we get the word out. And then the follow-up survey in 2024, where we'll see what kind of difference we've made in people's attitudes and awareness about salt. So if you want to learn more about the project, you can see the plan and the data we've collected. We have a cool setup now where the data that's collected, if you enter it with your smartphone, it updates automatically on the website. So you can see, real-time data trends as the data is being collected. You can look at our website or the project website here, or even scan this QR code right now, and it would take you to the project website if you want to learn more about it. Secondly, get involved. Many of you already are by helping us monitor and help spread the word out. But if you haven't already, educate yourself about Wisconsin Saltwise practices. Help spread the word about Saltwise practices through your own communities and networks and social media. And you can even volunteer to help us monitor the chloride if you're not already and are interested in doing something like that. So I just want to kind of acknowledge, our steering committee and all the agencies that have helped us with this project, especially the Friends. We couldn't be doing it without you. We did get a 2020 DNR planning grant that helped cover part of this project cost. And like I said, Saltwise has been a key partner in implementing this and educating people about the need to reduce salt. So with that, I can just take any questions if there are any.
I have a kind of random question that I don't know if you know the answer to, but maybe someone does. What about I see businesses struggling with the liability maybe of salt. I feel like that's I'm just going to put a bunch of salt on the ground. And so I don't know, do you know anything about that, or overcoming that barrier?
Yeah, I think to a large extent that's education piece that needs to be done, and it's something that Saltwise talks about during their trainings. When they had the training last week for the small applicators that do parking lots at Garver, I actually went to it so I could kind of see firsthand what the training was like and what people learned. And that's one of the things they talked about in the training, is that, you know, they've talked to lawyers, and basically if you can demonstrate that you put down the right amount of salt, you know, you're covered from a liability standpoint. So there's no need to put down, you know, excess salt or way more than what you need to. So as long as you're documenting that you're doing your due diligence, then you should be protected from liability. But that's one of the things that, you know, Saltwise is talking about doing, is basically working with the legislator to get some, you know, laws that would protect companies from liability, you know, for slip and fall on ice and things like that, if they did things the proper way. So I guess there's one other state, I forget, I think it was like New Hampshire or somewhere in the Northeast that has adopted that, but they're the only one so far. Vance,
Paul?
anything you want to add? You've been involved in this extensively.
No, you've done a really good job. It looked like Paul had a question. We can only take a couple more minutes on this.
Yeah, real quick. We already just covered the liability question I had, which I'm glad to hear you talking to the legislature, because I think that's a huge issue. People just want to cover their ASS. So
Yeah.
anyway, with salt, literally. The other one is speed. I was wondering if wintertime speed reductions are something the legislature could do that would reduce accident rates, which is really the metric that ends up driving it, I think. You know, the practices.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's another, you know, a lot of it comes down to education. That's another education piece, right? We kind of need to teach people that it's okay to slow down and drive slow in the wintertime, or not drive at all. Maybe that's one of the benefits of all the Zoom meetings in COVID, is if we get a big snow or ice storm, people will just stay home and not go outside. So we don't need to put salt down to clear the roads right away.
Any other good questions here? Okay. All right, well, we'll move on then to the next agenda item here on our list, and that we've got a new Starkweather Creek map. And I'm not sure if Dia has come on to discuss this.
I've been here for a while, Lance. I'm
There she
here.
is. Hey, Dia. Yay.
Hi. Hi, everybody. I'm Dia Larson-Converse. I'm one of the board members. And we're really excited about this new Starkweather Creek map. We put this together in 2021 to help people access the creek and learn more about what they're seeing as they're canoeing along. So the map is free. It's available on our website. And it's downloadable, so you can take it with you on your canoe trip. And it has some points of interest on it. At the very bottom middle part, there's Lake Monona, which is where you can rent boats from the Olbrook Park Beach. Rutabaga has a rental area there. And you can start going down the creek. You can also access it along the baseball fields area near right after the mouth of the creek. We have a lot of new access points that are marked on the map. And so you can access it further down or further up the watershed. We also have outings on the creek. We have monthly outings. Not all of them are canoe outings on the creek, but you can check us out. We have them posted on our Facebook page when we're going to have outings on the creek. And so we encourage you to download this map and take it along with you. Some points of interest I'd like to just point out right now is the confluence area where the east and west branches meet. It's a beautiful place. There's lots of, you can see painted turtles there. You can see, sometimes you can see herons fishing, you know, there's amazing amount of wildlife on the creek when you go along. So the East Branch is the one that goes to the right, and that goes by sort of a undeveloped area. There's the Voigt property, which is near there, which is up for sale right now. I don't know if you've seen the signs around the watershed for Voigt Farm. And so it goes along there. That's my favorite part of the creek. But if you go on the left-hand side, that's the West Branch, and that goes all the way to the airport. And when the water is high, you can actually get to the airport gates, but they have it blocked off. You can't go any further than that. So that's just basically the highlights about the map. If anybody has any questions, I know we're running short on time, so I'm doing the fast one here.
Any questions? All right. Well, thank you, Dia. And what a great new resource for folks. And we try to have this copies of this over at the Rutabaga for people to pick up during the summer when they take out a kayak from there, and so they can help understand where they're going and what they can see. All right. I think we'll move on then to the Lansness Legacy Park update with Jeff.
Yeah, so before we play the video, I just wanted to provide some context about where this is and how it got started. It's on the corner of McCormick and Commercial Avenue, and I know I mentioned that in the video, but it's in the Eakin Park Neighborhood Association. It's actually City of Madison engineering property. It's been a vacant lot for many, many years, and it's an underutilized public spot that we thought it would be a good idea to kind of start some restorations with native plants and try to turn it into more of a community art park, and kind of give back to the neighborhood that we can do something with. So I'll let the video talk more about this before I ramble too long and have you hear it all again. So you can play the video. The Lansness Legacy Park. It's a park on the corner of Commercial and McCormick Avenue in the Eakin Park neighborhood. It is November 12th, first snowfall of the season. Got a couple of flags flying. I just wanted to provide you an update on our efforts here at the Lansness Legacy Park and what we're doing here. We're working on a restoration along Starkweather Creek. So just to my right, you can see that this is the restoration in work. And right now I have a pile of native seeds. This is about $200 worth of native seeds. And we're going to be spreading this today at the Legacy Park. The Legacy Park is a collaborative effort between the City of Madison Engineering Department. It's actually technically their land. So the Engineering Department, Friends of Starkweather Creek, Wild Ones Madison, and the Eakin Park Neighborhood Association. We provided lots of updates to the park this year. So I kind of want to go over those updates with you and talk about what the future holds for this space. So right now, though, we're going to broadcast some native seed. And I'm going to kind of walk you through what we're doing here. So again, this is the native seed. In this bucket here, I have some dirt, and I'm going to combine the two. And the reason I'm doing that is because we want to create a good, nice, even coverage. Because if we just broadcasted the bare seed by itself, it would get in one area too dense. So this will help kind of broaden the coverage of what we're doing. So I won't broadcast the entire thing on this video, but maybe just a quick handful to kind of show you what the process entails. So you just kind of grab a handful and just kind of toss it out along the creek. And since we're standing up, I'll kind of give you a quick walk of the area. So this is the restoration in progress right now. We've gotten a lot of native plants from different organizations. Plant Dane, which is an organization through Dane County, has provided a lot of plants as well. Eakin Park Neighborhood Association has assisted us with funding to provide plants. And we also have some plants donated by city engineering. So we're hoping eventually to turn this entire shoreline into native plants. We have some work to do on the South Shore area, but we're hoping that will change with future restorations and these seed mixes. Also, I wanted to walk over here and show you these beautiful picnic tables that we had created from Dane Arts Mural Arts and in collaboration with the Eakin Park Neighborhood Association. So they're both handicap accessible. The funds for these were provided by donations through the Friends of Starkweather Creek. So we have a bluegill on this one and a perch on this one. So it's beautiful art projects. We had the neighborhood come down and actually help paint them. Dane Arts Mural Arts provided the artists and they outlined the fish drawings. And it was the responsibility of the volunteers to kind of paint in and trace what they did as well. Also, next to this tree over here, we have a Aldo Leopold nature bench provided by board member Paul Nolder. So I'll just get a little closer because it's pretty cool. It was dedicated to Carl Lansness, former co-chair of Friends of Starkweather Creek and friend who passed away. So this is Carl's kookaburra chair, and we have another rain garden over here, which we're hoping to help with some supplemental plants next year. Also, if we walk further this way, we have some native shrubs we planted. They look a little bare right now because it is fall and all the leaves have fallen off, but we're hoping this will help create kind of a barrier to some of the traffic in the area. And the last thing I wanted to point out is the beautiful bridge murals that we have created as well. So this was another collaboration with Dane Arts Mural Arts. So you can see there's the creek for reference. And we have these beautiful graffiti-proof paintings of different animals inside of Starkweather Creek. So they're quite beautiful. And there's some on the other side as well. So I encourage everyone here that hasn't already visited the Legacy Park to stop down. The address is 538 McCormick Avenue on the corner of Commercial and McCormick Street. And I look forward to providing future updates on the Legacy Park and the Eakin Park Neighborhood Association. So yeah, our eventual goal is to expand the restoration area into more of a crescent moon shape to kind of encompass the middle and provide community events there and more community art projects as well. Got a great response from the neighborhood, and I love walking by and seeing people utilizing our picnic tables on this new public space. So, and I'm not going to talk too much about this, but I just want to give you a brief, I guess, kind of rundown of this program that we had called the Volunteer Growers Network. Very pleased with the results of this program. So a lot of the plants in the Legacy Park, as well as different restoration sites along the West Branch primarily, have benefited from native plants grown by volunteers. So we had small groups of volunteers go out to different sites around Madison and collect native seeds. And we kind of advertised in Northside News and Eastside News and on social media like Facebook and Nextdoor, kind of asking for help with growing these seeds. So it was a huge success. And the method they used was the milk jug method, which this video talks about for about 5 minutes. So before I talk too much about how they grew them, just know that we had 100 volunteers sign up, which is huge. 100 volunteers were interested in growing seeds. And we provided 4 seed packets, so 4 different species to each volunteer. And they were told to put them in milk jugs. So we overall we got, I think, about 1,400 plants. So I had, my backyard was kind of a staging ground for these restorations. So one time I had 1,400 plants in my backyard. So wasn't much room left, but I'm pleased to report we got them all in the ground. So you can find these plants at the Legacy Park. There's also some in the rain garden over by, I guess, kind of by the Salvation Army over by East Washington. There's also 2 spots in the Eakin Park Neighborhood Association at the Washington Manor Park. There's a pollinator garden there. There's also a rain garden there as well. And then there's a spot we've been doing brush cutting restoration work up by the Carpenter Ridgeway Park that benefited from some of these plants. So we got them all on the ground. And if you're interested in growing your own native plants using the method that these volunteers used, you can use the milk jug method, which is in this video. So James, you can play it.
Hi, my name is Jeff Steele, volunteer naturalist with Friends of Urban Nature, and I'm going to walk you through the process of growing native plants from seed through the milk jug method. Credit to this program goes to the Dane County Plant Dane program. If you're interested in growing native plants with them, just Google Dane County Plant Dane. They have volunteers grow native plants to get distributed through the community, through schools or churches or any community projects, especially neighborhood associations. I'd like to teach you today how to grow native plants from a milk jug. So these are the supplies that you'll need. You will need dirt. You will need a plastic jug, whether that's distilled water or milk, as long as you rinse it out. You will need a Sharpie. I like to use a garden marker just because Sharpies tend to wear off over time and garden markers are waterproof. You'll obviously need native seeds. These are Golden Alexander. This is what I collected just along the bike trail. You'll need a box cutter or some kind of sharp tool to cut into the jug, and an extra label for inside in case the name you write on the outside of the jug wears off. And also a drill, so you can drill holes in the bottom of the milk jug to allow for some water to filter through. So the first thing I like to do is drill the holes. If you don't have a drill, that's not a big deal. You can use a knife, even a corn cob holder. You can pull holes into the bottom. It just kind of allows water to drain through slowly. So I'm just going to use this drill. I think it's a 1/4 inch drill bit, and drill a few holes in the bottom to help with some of the aeration. Let's put a couple of those in there. Now I have some holes in the bottom just to allow some drainage. Now I'm going to take very carefully this box cutter and cut just below the handle. I'm not going to cut all the way around. I'm going to leave some space here so the top will kind of fold open. So I'll show you what I mean in a second here. Slowly around. Sawing motion so I don't hurt myself. It have to be perfect. It doesn't matter if your edges aren't straight. Plants don't care, and you shouldn't either. When you're done, it should look like this. Cut in half, but still the handle portion is not cut completely. So you have kind of a tray on the inside. What I want to do is take some dirt, some soil. It doesn't matter what kind of dirt you use. You can even dig a hole in your yard and put dirt in there. Again, these are native plants that are adapted to this climate, and they're not really picky about what kind of dirt they need. But just for ease of use, I went to the greenhouse store and got some dirt. So if you want to fill up your milk jug until it's about an inch gap from the top. Up a little bit. Make Again, you can mix it with a few things too. Sometimes a good filler is some sand. If you have some sand lying around, you can mix it with some potting soil just so you have more of it. And the native plants usually aren't too picky. So when you're done, it should be about, oh, this is a little more like 2 inches than an inch, but you can put a little more in if you'd like. And what you're gonna do is take your seeds. These could be seeds that you find in the Madison area, or you can purchase them online. These are ones I collected, like I said earlier. These are Golden Alexander, a beautiful spring blooming yellow plant that likes wet conditions. And I guess I'll try to show you what I'm doing here. I'm just gonna lightly sprinkle these on top. And I'm gonna lightly kind of stir them around with my finger, not too much, just to kind of get some of the dirt covering it and kind of pat it down on top. I got a lot of people ask, why can't I just plant these in the summertime? Why do I have to do this this milk jug process over winter? The milk jug process is important because native seeds have this built-in dormancy mechanism called cold moist stratification. So basically this mechanism allows for native seeds, when they fall to the ground, not to germinate immediately because they'd be very susceptible to a frost. And seedlings would most likely be killed if they germinated immediately. So the seeds have developed over time this mechanism called cold moist stratification to germinate in the spring when conditions are better. So we're emulating right now the natural process of a native seed. So it's not going to germinate obviously until spring. And because this milk jug is translucent, you'll create a mini greenhouse for your seed and give it an extra head start. So again, I'm going to use my garden marker here. I'm going to write the name of the plant on the outside. In this case, it is a Golden Alexander. If you don't have a garden marker, that's okay. Just take a popsicle stick or tag like this and then write it and put it on the inside, just in case the outside wears off. So, Golden Alexander. I can't tell you, I learned the hard way. Labeling is important. You don't want to have your seeds grow in the spring and not realize what you planted, which seems pretty straightforward, but if you grow enough of them, you'll get confused. Some people recommend duct taping the outside just to keep this lid closed. I like to keep it open. You want to kind of emulate the natural processes. That way snow and rain and stuff will get inside, and that's what the seeds are looking for, to kind of break their dormancy mechanism. Also, it's important to leave the, if you're going to tape it especially, leave the cap off. That way some moisture can get inside and you can kind of emulate those conditions. Again, you can repeat this process for most native seeds you find around Madison. Some seeds have a little bit different dormancy mechanisms that can be broken, but generally the ones in Wisconsin abide by this rule. So yeah, if you're interested in helping grow some native plants, you can use the Plant Dane program, that's Dane County's program, or you can look into the Friends of Starkweather Creek. They have one called the Volunteer Growers Network, and you can contact them with the email restore@starkweatherfriends.org. Thank you very much.
So yeah, if 100 volunteers can do it, you can too. Again, we had a huge success with this program. The program is currently not happening in 2021 just because we had so many plants grown that we ran out of spots to put them. So we need to make more restoration areas before we start the program up again. But about half of the volunteers said they wanted to grow plants again, but I sent them to the Plant Dane program this year. So if they wanted to keep going, they could grow plants for the county. And I think next year, once we have some more restoration space, we'll start the program up again so we can get some volunteers growing some plants. So, and that's all I have for you. Any questions about the Legacy Park, our restoration areas, or the Volunteer Growers Network? Okay.
Okay, well, we're moving right along to our next slide, and that will be Paul Noldner telling us all about the nature outings. We have a lot of nature outings. We're part of a large program called Friends of Urban Nature, one of many organizations that provide these opportunities for people. So take it away, Paul.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, first of all, thanks, Lance, for inspiring everybody to grow native plants. And I just mentioned in passing, if they can't be placed somewhere in public spaces, we want every yard to be wild. There's this whole movement, the Homegrown National Park. So I just mentioned that again. Actually, how to plant these, how to do the milk jug things is one of the activities that we do on these bird nature adventures. And people are real interested, and I'm going to be doing one later yet this year as over winter, as winter sets in. It's a good time to do it. Just showing people how to do it. And then, if they have a spot in mind, great. If not, and tons of, I made the mistake of putting on a next door asking for milk jugs and still have a huge pile. So I'm going to try to find people interested in doing this, Lance. You've inspired us beyond your wildest dreams, or not Lance, Jeff, beyond our wildest dreams here, I think. Bird Nature Adventures. The whole objective of is connecting communities. The mission, shared mission of Friends of Starkweather, and in these outings was an attempt to help friends groups, especially friends groups that don't have time to put together a whole lot of activities, to have something on a regular scheduled basis, to make it part of a bigger program, and to partner with like Madison Parks is another partner, and Madison Audubon helps co-sponsor these outings. So it makes it a lot of fun. We do them regularly, and that also makes it easier to do special outings, which Friends of Starkweather, we've been doing canoe outings at the drop of a hat, so to speak, like this hat that Carl Lansness wore at one time. At any rate, what we've got coming up here, I'll mention in a moment, but the theme is to have fun nature topics, a little bit of education, and make it welcoming for the community, connect the community and kids with their nearby nature, and connect them with the Friends group. So this has been successful. We're entering, I'm pleased to announce tonight, we're entering our 10th year of doing this. Starkweather was added a little further along after the program got going, but this program of taking people into different parks and neighborhoods around Madison every weekend has been going now for 10 years. So I'm real pleased with that. And I just wanted to say a thank you right up front too, to looking at the schedule from last year here, a calendar, which I'm working on 2022. And we had Starkweather Friends help lead cleanup, James Winkleman exploring the creek, Lance doing creek life monitoring. We have the Eakin Park Festival and connecting people to nature in the Eakin Park neighborhood, biking the rain gardens. So we do things by walking, paddling, biking, native plant workshop with Jeff. And in November, I'll be doing on the 20th, Thanksgiving birds. What does Thanksgiving look like from the birds' point of view? This is an annual one, which is a lot of fun. And then Lynn Pearson, I helped teach a master naturalist class in town here, focused on urban nature and connecting people with like Friends of Starkweather. Like Eva Ruiz didn't take the class that I taught, but she's on this Zoom meeting right now. And it's a real opportunity to get connected with local groups. And Lynn is one of the master naturalists leading the winter solstice walk. I'll just mention up front, there's a lot of winter fun to be had. Try to bring a fire pit. We have permission from parks to have a fire after the walks at some of these locations. Starkweather is big, as you saw on the map. So we sometimes meet at Goodman. We sometimes meet by the canoe launch over by the Ball Diamonds across from Obick Gardens. And we sometimes meet at Lansness Legacy Park. It's a great spot. So different spots along the creek. And so that connects people with places they wouldn't have otherwise explored. And so then hopefully that becomes part of their neighborhood, especially for families and kids, to say, we have something special in our neighborhood. We might not get to Devil's Lake, we might not get to Yosemite, but we have nature right here where we live. We also do things and have fun there, like learning the Friends of Starkweather Creek song. There is a song You will learn if you come on these walks. I won't indulge you with it right here, but it's a lot of fun. In January, we'll have January 15th will be the Otter Go sledding party at Old Brick Hill or Old Brick Park Hill, which is across from Old Brick Gardens. And then Alex Singer will be leading Life Beneath the Snow. So it's a whole variety of topics. The other thing we added during COVID for this year's report is especially, it was interesting, and we tried to make sure that there were things that people could do on their own and in this Zoom world. So we asked the people who led the different nature topics each month to put something online about it, kind of like those wonderful videos that Jeff just showed you that say, here, you can learn how to do a milk jug native plant starter, you know, and then go do this on your own. And we also had a walk to do that. We did have outings. Participation was down, but we did it in a COVID safe manner. And there were people who really enjoyed that, but then they also enjoyed these self-guided. So we're going to continue that in 2022, having self-guided activities and maps and fun facts for people who want to just take a walk at and learn another area of the creek or learn about salt lies, for example. It can be any topic. It's a real chance just to get out there and connect with the community and talk about a topic that you're enthused about. So we're always looking for new leaders and new topics. So I would encourage to think about that and what might be interesting topics and good leaders, and get back to me. I also want to add this year maybe a pontoon outing. We partner with MSCR, and they have pontoons that they bring and can bring to the beach, for example, and so show people the whole Monona watershed, you know, the view from the shoreline over there. We have an annual Bird and Nature Festival in town, and Friends of Starkweather has been a big part of that every year. Lance especially leading some pond dipping activity with kids, which he also does, and I help with that. It's one of the more special events that fall into this category of outings, taking school kids out pond dipping. And there was, on that note, Watershed Wanders, one of our big partners is Goodman Community Center, working with James and others before him. We hope to be doing that again this year, a regular schedule of special outings for Goodman community kids. Whoop. I'll answer that later. And then Goodman Family Fun Nights. I'm hoping that starts again because some of us have helped with those. So there's a lot of opportunities to plug in. The whole point of this nature outing, in real general terms, framework is to make it easy to plug in, easy to just show up. We have some resources like canoes and paddles. We have fold out tables if they're needed for an activity or an event, and fun things to do. So with that, I think I'll end it on a little joke here for you, just to see if everybody's awake yet. We just adopted a little puppy, so my wife was telling me pet jokes. What do lazy dogs chase? Can anybody guess? Parked cars. Never mind. Anyway, it's bad. So any questions on any of that, or comments anybody else would like to add? Okay, thank you. And I'll see you out on the trail. It's always wonderful. Friends of Starkweather board members and any members are welcome on these, and they are, I didn't even mention up front, they're public, they're free. And thank you for everybody here actually for helping with the publicity and helping with these events.
All right. Great job, Paul. And wow, what a wonderful experience that you have created, and a way for people to get in touch with nature. And we're so happy to have been a part of it for the last 7 or 8 years, I think. So excellent.
Yeah, actually, Lance, that's you in that picture on the Bird Nature Adventure poster at left. Right there, talking to some kids. And I like that picture.
Yeah, and I see Nancy down there and over here.
Oh yeah.
So yay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I think I'll move on to the next item, which is, I'm just going to do really brief here, just really brief. There's certainly a lot that we've been learning and understanding about the health of Starkweather Creek. And it used to be a pretty much a cesspool and a dumping grounds back in the 40s and 50s, before the first Earth Day and before the Clean Water Act and up. And so then a lot started happening, and the Madison sewage got diverted from it to a sewage plant in the 30s, and people have been really good about cleaning up the area. And oh boy, whenever I see anybody out there paddling and canoeing, almost always they're picking up garbage. So, and we have a cleanup usually on around Earth Day in the spring. But I'm going to talk about 3 chemical issues here that we have. You've already learned about the chlorides issue, and on the top right, you see the little strip that we use there to measure the chloride. It's a real simple way for us to measure how much chloride is in the water. And as you said, that's mostly by salt. And we're really happy to be part of a big effort to reduce that salt, because not only is it going in the stream, but it's sinking down into the groundwater and getting to our drinking water here in Madison. So we're really concerned about that as a city, for sure. The second issue I'll just mention there is phosphorus. Phosphorus is put on from fertilizers. A lot of it has been going through the Yahara chain of lakes for quite a while, and this causes a thing like those algae blooms, those nasty looking green and purplish and orangish blooms of algae you see that are actually toxic to you, your kids, your pets, and have been really messing up the ecology of our lakes for some time. And so there's some good efforts to reduce phosphorus. In Starkweather Creek itself, of course, we don't have a lot of agriculture on our creek, but still we have runoff from people's yards and from places where people are planting stuff. And I actually take a sample of the creek water, as does my group piper. Each month, we get a sample and take it down to the Madison Metropolitan Sewage District, where they analyze it to tell how much phosphorus is going through the creek and into the lakes. So an issue we've been aware of a lot. The third issue there is PFAS. PFAS is that group of very dangerous chemicals that have come from years and years of use of firefighting foams at the airport. They are in the ground underneath the airport. They are in the surface water near the airport. They're in the storm water that comes off the airport, and they are continuously oozing out of the ground into the sides of Starkweather Creek and into Starkweather Creek around the airport, and also down deep into the ground where they are getting to the deep groundwater. In fact, the city of Madison a year and a half ago, had to close well 15 on East Washington. It's only about a mile from the sources of the pollution, but the PFAS have gotten all the way down in the groundwater and are now showing up in that well and other wells now. I'm also part of the Water Action Volunteer Program, where we monitor the creek monthly during the summer months, and we take measurements of how much turbidity is in the water, how clear the water is, with the temperature, the dissolved oxygen, and so forth. And we also take a look at and sample for what critters are living in the water, because what invertebrates live in the water are a real good test of how toxic the water is and how healthy the water is. So we do that under a statewide program where hundreds and hundreds of volunteers are measuring the water and monthly monitoring the water all around the state. So those are some of the things we do to monitor and watch Starkweather Creek's health, and we certainly advocate for cleaning up things like chloride and phosphorus and PFAS from our waters. And so that's just a really brief coverage. If anybody's got any questions, we can answer those briefly. Not seeing anybody. Anybody have any questions? Otherwise, we'll just move right along.
What's that critter
Go
in the
ahead.
picture? What's in the picture?
Oh, what's the little bug down there? That's called a giant water bug, and it's kind of a beetle, and they're fairly frequent down there. We also see some crayfish down there. Once in a while we see little fish, but we see a lot of the invertebrates that like toxic water, like mayfly larvae and scuds and other invertebrates that can handle toxicity. we don't see a lot of dragonfly larvae because they need cleaner water to propagate.
You ever find anything unusual or rare, I guess, in terms of invertebrates?
Oh, not really too rare. We find leeches, of course. They're pretty tolerant also. But it's nice to pull up a crayfish and see it moving around, and a live crayfish is good to see because they can tolerate about medium kind of toxicity in the water, and that's pretty good. So no, we haven't found anything really too special. We do keep an eye out for the several of the invasive species that we're finding around Wisconsin, and luckily we haven't found the 3 main invasive species yet. So we'll keep an eye out for those. But all through the winter, we're going to be monitoring the chloride. As Mike Repiper said, we've got a whole system of people looking at what the chloride levels are and how they're going to change over the winter. It's kind of sad when you saw those graphs that we have a fairly high level, 150 to 100 in the west branch and about 150 to 200 in the east branch of milligrams per liter already very regularly, even all summer. Even when nobody's putting salt down, we've got salt in our water. So it's a very serious problem that we're going to have to deal with. Thank you.
Yeah,
Paul?
just a follow-up question that had come to my mind, or how what we're doing relates to these 3 problems and native plants, and wherever possible, running water through rain gardens, and that's another thing. We didn't talk about it much tonight, but we really try to help promote rain gardens, because one of the things I understand, there are some native plants, like it was mentioned about that Jeff mentioned, that particular milkweed or goldenrod can help pull it out. And I just think that with that effort, those things tie together, that ecological mitigation. Another thing I think that would be a fun topic for 2022 for discussion on our board is, and with the city and whatnot, is how does the channelization of the creek relate to its value for eco remediation, or whatever you would call it? And to what extent could that actually be modified to have more little side pools and side, seasonal overflow ponds and this sort of thing? Because that's where a lot of life needs still water, and it's not necessarily going to breed mosquitoes. If it also breeds dragonflies, that'll keep them out. So you want side ponds with life in them, not just standing water, because that's always considered a no-no. But I just think there are some opportunities there. I'm going to toss it out as something for 2022 to say what is actually, what are we doing with the architecture, the landscape architecture here, to make the best use of this water resource, to grow as much life as possible. And then how does that help us deal with both plant and aquatic, and help us deal then with these challenges that we're looking at on this slide.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Paul, because as you see on the one slide on the bottom right, there's a lot of plant life on the bank of the creek there. If there's just mud, then all that mud goes in there. It really hurts the phosphorus project. The sediment and the mud has a lot of phosphorus in it. So the more we keep the banks vegetated with native plants, which have nice long roots to suck up the water and absorb the water, the better off we'll be. Thanks a lot. All right, next topic. We've got a financial report, and our wonderful treasurer, Doug Johnson, is going to kind of just briefly go over this with us. Thanks, Doug.
All right. I'll be very brief because not just because of time, but there isn't very much of any surprise here. Most of you have seen all of this before anyway. Good news here is we had 61 people that paid membership dues of various amounts last year. And that was like 3 times more than the year before. So that is good. If we can continue to attract people that are interested in supporting us, that's how we keep going. The other income was a lot of it was donations for Carl in his memory, and that money there we spent on the canoe map and the picnic tables and paint and stuff like that. The administrative expenses are pretty standard year to year. That's just what we need to spend to keep the organization running. The more variable stuff is what we spend on activities. Last couple of years, we haven't had too much in the way of large canoe tours and activities like that. So we haven't spent a lot of money on things like that, but we have spent a good amount of money on plants and seeds and things like that for projects that don't involve a lot of people getting together in one place. And that's been supporting our restoration activities. Canoe storage, since we share our canoes with FYI, they've picked up the cost for the canoe storage for the last couple of years, and so that's been a big help as well. And the good news is, well, we spent less money than we brought in, so we're on a good track.
Excellent. Any questions about that? And you may have noticed the city engineering department gave us $1,000 this year, and we occasionally get that $500 to $1,000 from them to help us out. So we're
yeah, they don't do that every year, but every few years they chip in some money.
Yep. Any questions? And certainly anybody online who wants to send in a membership or all you have to do is get on our website and click on our membership page, and you can actually do a donation or a membership right through our website page. And so feel free to do that. And any other questions? Oh. All right. Well, the last item of business really tonight is the election of board members. We have a wonderful list of current board members there, and we have been doing well in this past year. Board members work pretty hard. We have a monthly meeting that we come to, and each board member takes on kind of a different part of the organization and works with it to help us in all of our between outreach, between watershed health, between advocacy and outreach and so forth. We do a lot. We put out a newsletter 2 or 3 times a year, and we have a website, we have a Facebook page, and so we really everybody chips in and helps out in their own way to make all those good things happen. And those are our current board members that you see. Most of them, I think, are on the meeting tonight. We have had some interest in some new board members that would like to join us, and we're very happy about that. We have Mike Rupiper, who spoke with you before. Ralph Smith, we know through a couple of different avenues. He's a very avid biologist and hydrologist who is really going to be able to help us out, and he's been active in the project on the Voigt property to hopefully get a nice conservation park there on that. And Eva is with us tonight. I wonder if Eva or Mike, perhaps Eva, if you'd like to just say a few words about what you would like, why you would like to be on our board.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Eva. I am new to Madison. I just moved here in August. I'm actually from Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I just finished my master's in landscape architecture and conservation ecology at University of Michigan. And now I'm working at Psyche Design, a landscape architecture firm here. And I have a strong love of native plants and local ecosystems of the Great Lakes. And yeah, it's been thanks to Paul, I got connected because I worked with Lynn Pearson on one of the nature walks. And so I'm leading another in December, and it's been really fun. So yeah, I've just been looking for ways to get involved with groups like this since I just moved here, and Paul recommended Friends of Starkweather Creek. And yeah, I am happy to help in any way I can. I would love to. this is my first meeting, so I'm still learning what you might need, but I do have some graphic design experience in addition to like more classic ecology experience, like with plants and water monitoring, stuff like
All
that.
right.
Okay, yeah, that's all.
All right. Thank you so much. And Mike, I think you're still on. Would you like to say a few words to us?
Sure. So besides the chloride project, which you heard quite a bit about, Lance mentioned, I also been monitoring Starkweather Creek as one of the Rock River Coalition volunteers. I do the Highway 30 site. Started that this summer. But what really kind of got me interested in getting more involved was I participated in Jeff's volunteer plant growing network and grew some native plants from the seeds and helped plant some over at Landis Park there. And I really like this idea that was mentioned tonight. I think maybe Paul brought it up about doing rain gardens, and I could see that as a fun project where we could go and install some rain gardens throughout the watershed or something like that. It sounds like there's a number of people on the board that might be interested in that kind of project. And also know from my monitoring, we pulled out some old bike frames and metal wheels and things like that in various parts of the creek, and be fun to do some cleanup events and things like that too. So it's my watershed. I just want to get more involved in making it better.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mike. And thank you so much, Eva. I don't believe Ralph is on the call. Is Ralph on the call?
Yeah, he wasn't able to participate tonight, but he sends his greetings and he is enthused. He won't be totally surprised if we approve his addition to the board.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, well, now I also open it up to anyone else on the call who may be interested in being a board member. Of course, everybody can always help and volunteer. You don't have to be a board member to be a part of our organization. We have a lot of activities, as you've heard out, and we try to get the word out to people to help us out. And so that's another way to participate for sure. But if anybody on the call want to raise their hands or speak, now's the time if you'd like to be on our board. Oh, not hearing anything. I guess we'll just move right along and have a vote. I think what we'll do is just say this is going to be a unanimous vote unless someone objects to a unanimous vote to having these board members on for the next year. And give you 5 seconds to object. And nobody's going to object. So looks like we're good. We welcome Mike and Ralph and Eva to our board. Yay! Excellent, excellent. We have our board members have been on the third Thursday of the month, and this has been, or the third Tuesday of the month, and this has been actually the third Tuesday. And so next month we will have our first board members with all the first board meeting with all the board members, and choose who is going to be on the executives and so forth of the board, and talk about what our priorities are for the next year. All that's exciting. James, I think you can go to the last slide on here. We can start to say goodbye to everybody.
I was also just going to mention the website. So we are recording this and we might post it. So if people are interested in learning more or connecting with us, the information's on the website to email Starkweather Creek, or if you want to be a board member, there's an application to fill out as well on the website. Right. Yeah.
All right. Excellent. Well, as the Duckies say, thank you all for caring about Starkweather Creek. They want to live there. They want clean water. They want a happy environment. And so do we. And so thank you all so much for being a part of it. And I'm looking forward to a wonderful year, another wonderful year with Friends of Starkweather Creek. Any other comments? All right.
Thanks for comment and welcome new members. Hi.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, thank you.
And good job, everyone that was presenting. That was interesting. I didn't get to talk today, which was probably maybe good, maybe not. But I enjoyed listening.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, bye-bye, everybody.
All right, thanks for putting this together, James.
Yeah, thanks, James.
Good job.
Great job.
Thanks, everyone.
Good job. Hi, Doug.
Bye.
I'm going to stop the recording.
I think we need a